Hello and welcome. This is Kristen from the Online Selling Show, and today I'm going to do a special episode. It is January 6th, and this is a time when people in retail generally call this Return-ary, meaning that this is when buyers start to bring in a huge influx of returns for various whatever reasons, buyer's remorse, it arrived too late, whatever, it got here damaged, and you bring it up and you look like you got that on November 3rd and you just want to tell me about it now. There's various reasons. More so on Amazon will they do the extended returns, and they have until January 31st to return it. But I always think in analogies. That's just kind of how my mind works. And today, as we're dealing with our business's influx of stuff coming back and the various complaints all of a sudden on the inbox that's coming in, this analogy came to me, and I want to share, because maybe you're like me and having that visual in your head of a storytelling will give you a way to also deal with your emotions of dealing with it. Because for me anyway, I look at it like, I don't know how much more as a seller I can do. I've put dimensions in there. I'm using stock photos from my manufacturers or taking really good photos. I sent it the same day. There was no flaws. It had to happen on the buyer's end. There's so many scenarios of what's out there, and we would all love to have sales that are 100% sell through with no returns. I mean, that's just the utopia of what we would all like, and that's not the reality. And the analogy that came to me today is, I'm going to set the stage for, imagine yourself at the hospital and, I don't know, your kid broke their arm and you're sitting there and you're waiting and you see the vending machines and you get this idea that I'm going to just go buy a bag of potato chips. And you get over there and they're $1. And I know, what's the dollar in this day and age going to buy you? But in this example, we're just going to say they're $1. And you say, all right, you know what? Let me get this bag of chips. And you put the dollar in, and what happens? It gets stuck coming down the machine. And that's where, in my analogy of this, is when you're first getting that client that's going to complain to you for whatever reason. We all have choices to make at that point in time. And one choice could be, you look at this and you say, that's a sign that I'm just not supposed to have these. I didn't need those chips. And you say, I'm going to just walk away. Now, I think most of us would agree that option is realistically never going to happen. So I think a buyer coming in to complain, I don't think any of us are just going to automatically send them a refund or just ignore them. I think we're all going to take some action. And the action in my analogy would be, I think we're going to look at that and start banging on the glass a little bit, shaking that machine a little bit, trying to see can we coax it to come out of this machine? And I think that's where we respond back and we start shaking the machine. We start shaking that buyer a little by saying things like, can you send us the photos of the damage? Or didn't you see there was dimensions? Or here's your tracking, whatever it may be. We have some response that we give back to them, trying to elicit, the people. Maybe they said the package didn't arrive and you're like, well, the tracking says it was delivered in your mailbox. Did you look with your neighbors? Things like that is what I'm referring to. I think we all do something back and we shake that machine. And at this point, there's another set of choices because it's still stuck. And, in the first example I'm going to give is that some of us may just say, okay, we've shook this machine a little bit, nothing's changed, and I'm just going to walk away. And that may be where you just tell the buyer to send it back. Maybe you just give them a refund. You could choose to ignore too, but I don't know how many of us are going to take that route. I think some of us have shook the machine a little bit, and we're going to go another step. And some of us may look at it and say, I'm going to go buy another bag of chips to see if that forces it down. Or maybe buy that bottle of water that's above it, and we'll spend that second dollar and put it in the machine. Because now we're going to see, in our mind, we're saying, I'll drink that water with my chips, or I'll give my kid that other bag of chips, or I'll save that chips for tomorrow. So some of us may say to the buyer, well, can I give you a partial refund? Or just send it back and you pay the return label because you want to make them happy. Maybe you even just tell them to keep the item and not have to return it because for whatever reason, maybe the item's only worth $5 and you realize that it's going to cost you money for them to have it come back. Or you give them the partial refund to just keep the sale in place. Or some of us may offer a replacement with a prepaid label to return back. Whatever reasoning you want to put to it, I don't think that's a bad decision, and most of the time it probably will work. Most of the time, if you buy that second bag and that pushes it out, you'll get both bags, or you'll get the bottle of water with the chips. And that is not a bad solution. For some of us, we may say, well, that was my last dollar. Maybe you got fired yesterday. Maybe you don't have any other dollar bills on you, and you're like, I don't have this is war. I've had it with this machine, and you can make some decisions then. I mean, the obviously worst case scenario is you start really shaking on that machine because maybe I'm gonna pull my back out. So now I've done some hurt to myself. So maybe you really went crazy on this buyer, and now all of a sudden they've escalated it to eBay, and you have to now pay not only like the return fees of this shipping to come back, but you're gonna they're gonna get their full money back with the shipping cost that it took to send it to them. And you're sitting there like, how did I get to this position? Or you really shook the machine, you kicked it, and now all of a sudden like you're on video and you got to go to court because you damaged these people's machines and you really had to go something excessive, and maybe you're going to have like some kind of like ding on your account and everything else to have to answer for. I'm not saying it's out the realm of possibility, but I think most of us would step back and say like, that just does not make sense. Why would you do something so bad that it's going to hurt yourself or get you jammed up? And we're not saying it doesn't happen, but most of us would step back and say, that just doesn't make sense. So you have to keep in mind, like, as you're dealing with these returns, like, where's the road really leading on this? We can get ourselves so wrapped up because we've got our time invested in it. We've chosen these goods to sell. So we have an emotional attachment somewhat into this. It is our money. So financially, we have an attachment. And I think we need to step back and say, okay, what is the realistic picture here? I think you could go another route, and that could be that maybe you're flush with cash. Maybe you had like on December 20th a birthday and you got all kinds of money in cards. And then the 21st is payday. So now you got payday in there. And then like the 22nd, you got a scratch off lottery ticket for your birthday and you wind up winning money. And then like the 23rd, you get your tax return back in your account. The 24th, I don't know, you find $100 laying on the ground that nobody can, claim. And now it's December 25th and you got all this money from Christmas gifts. And you're flush with cash. And you may say, you know what? I don't really need all of this, and say, I'm going to just walk away, tell these people to keep everything, and realize, you know what? I got more opportunities. Maybe you look at it and say, you know what, if it's worth it to you, to this buyer, here you go, because I have maybe all this other inventory that I'm dealing with that it's not worth my time to deal with you, and I completely write it off. That's an acceptable solution as well. Like I said, if it's your last dollar, maybe you have skin in the game and you really have to fight for it, whether it be to get your cost of goods back or just to get the lack of labels for the shipping and stuff. Whatever the fight may be, that may be something you have to deal with. At the same time, you could be trying to deal with this stuff and the doctor starts calling you and you have to drop the stuff because you got to go deal with your kid. And that's fine too. Maybe other things are pressing on you that you want to fight for that stuff. And maybe you can just like jot down the phone number real fast for the vending machine owner and you call them again at a future time. So maybe there's a crisis going on right now and you can't fight for what you want back. Maybe it's your selling fees or something like that. You may be able to do that again later. But as again, if you have all that cash invested, you may say, you know what? It's not worth my time. I know I could write this or call this phone number. It's not worth it. But, you may have to fight for it because that's what you need to do because of whatever business decisions you make. But as my son is like to bring up, is that sometimes both things can be right at the same time and both things can be wrong. And I just say to keep that in mind, because maybe the vending machine stopped working because the electric went out. That doesn't mean that you don't have a right to get your dollar back or get your goods, but it's not wrong that the machine's not working. And that could be because what it needs to operate, what goes into it, isn't available then. So maybe, if you're trying to complain and yell at a customer service rep for eBay, they may not have the resources available to give you a solution that's going to make you happy because it's just not something that's available to them. Yelling and screaming may, in a very few instances, it doesn't have electric to that machine, and you can still shake the machine, and you still can at times get some results. So maybe still shaking the machine without the electric will work, but sometimes you're going to say to yourself, it's still not going to work, and I'm just going to have to walk away. That doesn't mean that maybe you still don't take the phone number and call that owner at some point to still try to get a resolution. So if there are some kind of problems in what buyers are being able to do, maybe you do have to report the buyer, because maybe they are, from the actions they're taking, leading you to believe that they are a serial returner, meaning that everything they do, they're using it for their purpose and sending it back. There are a lot of people like that, and I've seen it many times where they're returning something on that 30th day because they probably wore this sweater twice to get people to think they have this huge wardrobe, and now they're returning it back. I'm telling you, you can tell those people a mile away in the way that they handle their returns. And that may be when you have to, call that number up to the owner and complain. And maybe you don't have to deal with it right that moment. Maybe you let it sit for a week because there's a crisis or something going on, and you just let it sit and you come back to it in a week. That's acceptable as well. The only thing is you have to make those decisions as the business owner, where, when, and how you're going to handle these. You have to become almost like it's a chore, like anything else. If you had to do your dishes, you have to do the dishes. Maybe you're not doing them at the same schedule I'm doing it, but they have to all get done. Laundry has to get done. The cat's litter box has to get cleaned out. And it's like one of them chores that maybe the cat's litter box is not one that you really like to do. I don't think any of us likes to do it. But if you ignore it for so long, it's really going to smell, and it's going to get to be a health hazard. And if you ignore your returns, whether it be ignoring the customer's complaints or not dealing with the returns when they come back, or not eventually getting the money that you're entitled to at times, it's going to become a really stinky, smelly situation, and it may become something toxic at some point for something in the organization because you haven't dealt with it. Where, how, when, I'm not saying every situation is got to be handled the same way, but I think when you start removing the emotion of it, or you start looking at it, what it really is, you step back from it and you realize, that is not me. That is not how I wanted to handle it. And an extreme example for me, I can distinctly remember one woman who just had me so upset, but it wasn't like most people think you're going to get mad, but I was like so upset for her, like so almost crying, because it's like, I don't know how much more I could do for this person. It was a whole like Christmas gift for a kid, and they were military, and I didn't like the military, and I was so emotionally drained from almost like crying. So I'm not saying you have to be emotionally wrapped up in things, being upset and mad. There are other emotions that can go along with it. And my husband at that time said to me, you know what? I'm handling the returns for now. And I said, please handle these customer complaint ones, because I just was not in a headspace I could deal with them at that time. So come up with some kind of personal policies if you can, or not personal, but business policies for how you want to personally handle them, because there are instances to do it that are available. It may not have to be you. Maybe there's somebody else in the business that can deal with it, but it has to get dealt with. Unfortunately, this is the time of year when we see the highest of it. And I hope this analogy will give you something to step back and think about if you do find yourself getting drawn into that emotion part of it with handling that. I know there's probably a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, well, this doesn't make sense in your story, or this could be better said, or I'm only here to give an analogy. I understand this is not a one-size-fits-all. I understand there's probably a lot of flaws in the story. If you want to make some comments, I'd really appreciate hearing stuff, but try to keep it constructive. I'm trying to be helpful in helping others build their channel, but do it in such a way that it's scalable, that you can handle it and not have to feel saddened by it, because there is so much to be offered in this reselling world. I've been living it for 22 years. I've had a lot of benefits that have come out of it. I am where I am today because of it. And I would really appreciate a thumbs up if you got any good content out of this. I'm going to say bye for now, and I'll catch you on the next one.